We're going to talk now about creating tension and emotion in characters in your story. And whether it's a graphic novel or a prose novel, um, those things have to be built into the story up front. There's no way to convey them and make them especially interesting in a graphic novel if they aren't there in the heart of your plot to begin with. So you always have to remember that you have to create characters that are interesting and engaging to your reader, and to find a conflict in your story that your reader will find interesting and suspenseful, and that your characters can believably be engaged in. So all of those things are given in any kind of plot, whether it's a movie or a prose book or a graphic novel. But I'm going to talk specifically about how to convey these things once they're built into your story, how to convey them visually in a graphic novel. Let's talk about the issue of character first. Now, like I said before, at this point I have the entire story in my head for Dragon Girl, and I know all of the things that are going to be happening, all of the events, and what the characters are going to be doing and how they're going to react to them. Now it's my job to convey the characters that happen in the story in a visual way, and that means I've got to get a sense of what they look like, how they're designed, so to speak, and that means more than just their clothing and how their hair is arranged and their visual features. It also means understanding their body language and how their face looks under different circumstances. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm doing a bunch of random sketches of the characters in different situations so that I can get a sense of how I feel about how the character stands. You know, whether they stand in a slump that implies that they're not very confident, or whether they stand up straight and erect like they are confident. The sort of range of expressions and looking at their face from a lot of different angles. And this process really helps me figure out who this character is visually. Going through this process helps me solidify in my mind that Alana is this very confident, intelligent kid, and that her face is very expressive, and that I understand what it looks like from, say, the side view and from front-on views and from with her head tipped down or up. Once I've sort of got the feel for her features, then I know that when I get into telling the story with her, I know who she is well enough that I can be consistent throughout the course of the whole graphic novel. In designing her clothing, I wanted her to look like pretty much an everyday, ordinary, poor medieval kid. Pants didn't seem appropriate for the time, so she's wearing a dress. She's got these leggings to keep her legs warm, and you know, her hair is not, she's not one of these blonde Disney princess types. Her hair is just dark and sort of mousy and just sort of hangs around her head in a very unstyled manner. All of these things tell you about what an unpretentious sort of a kid she is, I think. That's the intention anyway. But her clothing doesn't stay as bland as that throughout the whole story. In fact, I want to find a look for her that's sort of distinctive so that her character will be, easily identified by readers. And that's where her dragon costume comes in. Now, she adopts a dragon costume so that she can take care of these baby dragons that she finds in the cave without them sort of becoming too familiar with humans. She decides to sort of make herself look like a dragon. Now, the points here are that it's got to be an outfit that's sort of visually appealing, something that a kid would actually find kind of fun to wear, so that the reader can empathize with the costume. So you don't want it to look goofy. And it also has to look homemade because it's something that she has to craft herself. And so these are the solutions that I came up with: this leather vest that she wears and the sort of cape that doubles as dragon wings. But most importantly, this helmet that she's made herself that gives her a dragon head. And I designed that so that the sort of mouth of it could be open for her to look through, or it could be closed up so that she could wear it like a hat. I go through this same design process for every character in the book. Here you see the sketches that I did for her brother Hamill, and I wanted him to be a more serious sort of a guy. He's got a lot of weight on his shoulders if you've read the book, and a lot of responsibility because their parents are gone and he's trying to take care of Alana. And so he's a responsible, much more level-headed kid than Alana is. So you'll notice in Hamill's body language, he's sort of a graceful guy. He's athletic. You know, he works as a blacksmith and he's a hunter, and he's a perfectly competent sort of a guy. He just doesn't have the same sort of imagination as Alana does. And so I wanted his features and his bearing to convey those personality traits about him. These are the sketches for Margolin. Now, Margolin's an interesting character to me because she's very much out of her time. Even though it's set in medieval times, she's not a medieval thinker, and she's very liberated, if you will. You know, she's a scientist, she's very self-confident and very independent, and so you'll see she's also foreign. She's from a different land. My conception was that she was from Persia or someplace to the east of where the kids lived, and so her exotic clothing and her face tattoos, and even the fact that she wears these sort of pants instead of a dress, sort of tells you a lot about how exotic and intelligent she is. Then we've got Cedric, the villain of our piece, and he's designed as this very arrogant and vain knight. And I wanted his costuming to reflect that. And so you see he's got a suit of armor to convey that he's a knight, but he also had to be able to move in it. So it's not like a full suit of armor. It's just a few plates. That way he can believably be walking through the story in this outfit and doing the things that he's doing. And you'll also notice the design of it. He's got like medals hanging off of him and these sort of braids across his shoulder and a very ornate helmet, all meant to convey just how terrific a guy he thinks he is. So you get a sense of his arrogance and vanity from the armor that he wears. Now that we've got our characters designed, let's talk about how we tell a dramatic story with them. And I'm going to give you a few examples of the scenes and sequences from the book where I was trying to sort of build up a little bit of tension and a little bit of drama to a reveal that was going to happen in the story. This scene here is Alana sneaking out of the house to don her Dragon Girl costume for the first time. And so I sort of drag out the build-up to it a little bit, and you'll see. And usually a panel set of 3 is a good way to do these sorts of things, to give a little bit of a build-up to a scene. You can see that she packs her bag there up near the top of the page and sort of sneaks out of the house, runs through the woods, and then you see this 3-panel scene of her hiding behind a tree, peeking to make sure there's nobody else looking, and then taking her new costume out of the bag. Then there's another set of 3 that show her actually donning the costume. And each panel is designed to give you a little bit of detail about what it is she's designed. You see first the vest, but you don't see it clearly enough to know what it looks like all buttoned up. Then you see her tying the cape around her neck. And then finally, the most important part, her putting that helmet on her head. And then that's when we get the big reveal of her in her costume. And this is the first time you see it on her. And so it's an important moment. And these sequences of seeing her sneak out of the house and hide behind a tree to make sure no one's looking, and then the sequence of her actually putting on the costume is all a way to try and build up interest in what she's doing and in what an important moment it is for her until we finally see her in her costume. Here's another example of trying to build a little tension before a big reveal in the story. The characters are all gathered in this cave when suddenly they hear this terrifying roar from the back of the cavern, and the first thing that you see is their faces as they're reacting to hearing this sound. And then in this 3-panel sequence at the bottom you see this darkness of the cavern in the back of the cave, and then the eyes sort of appear, and then in the 3rd panel we actually see what's coming out of there and what's made that noise. And then as you turn the page, there's a big dramatic reveal of that huge dragon that's come out to threaten them. And this is an example of another storytelling device that's available in comics. This contrast between the even rhythm and small panels on the previous page to this big expansive scene that runs across 2 pages of this dragon being revealed and confronting these characters. Spectacle is an important part of comic storytelling. This is the scene of Alana first arriving in the secret valley full of dragons, and you can see how expansive this is. This is another 2-page spread meant to sort of provoke a sense of awe about the setting with the reader. The only trick to doing these sorts of spectacles is that you don't want to go to that well too often. If you try and create huge spectacle on every page, then the story doesn't have any sort of rhythm to it. There are no lows that will contrast and make the highs feel even higher. Layout can play an important part in the drama and tension in a scene too. You'll notice in these two pages, it's the scene where Alana and her pet dragon Griffin are trying to make their way back to the safety of the Dragonfly, the flying ship in the book. And it's quite a wild ride because Griffin's really a tiny dragon and he may not necessarily be up to the task of carrying her through the sky back to the safety of this ship. Now here the layout with these slightly turned panels is intended to help give that sense of movement across the sky and also the sense of how precarious and unstable their flight is. So the way that you tell the story in terms of how you use your page layouts and what you decide to show are very important to the drama of the story. But equally important is the drama of the characters. You have to have, so to speak, good actors in your story. Just as a dull, inexpressive actor in a movie would make the movie a lot less interesting, that same thing applies to the characters that you draw in your story. And you can see here a range of different moments from the tale where the characters have to be good actors, so to speak. You have to have facial expressions that really convey their emotions to the reader and really help connect the reader to the people and what's happening to them. I've got two exercises for you to try to apply the things that we've been talking about in this video. The first is to design a character. And you can either design a character on your own based on the story that you've written, or if you don't have one ready, try and redesign an existing character. And think about what characteristics you're going to give them to help convey the idea of who they are and what they're like to your reader. And that doesn't just mean the way they're dressed, but it also means the way they stand and the facial expressions that they might go through. See if you can draw a different set of facial expressions for the different emotions that they might have to go through in the story. The second exercise is to think of a dramatic moment in your story or in a story that you've read and try and figure out how to lay out the page to build up to that dramatic event. In other words, you don't want to just show the event itself, but what happens before that is going to build up some tension when that event is finally revealed. And I suggest you do this by referring back to the video that we talked about last time and doing just thumbnail sketches. You don't have to do full page layouts, but just sort of thumbnail sketch a few different ways that you might be able to make a dramatic scene more dramatic by the way you build up to it.